Very good.
Check it works, yeah.
So has it reached 7 o'clock?
Yes. Yes.
Good. Who's nicked all my pens?
Alright, spares.
I know Chris is just coming in. Good evening.
Good evening. Sorry I'm late.
You're okay? There's a seat here, Chris.
Thank you. I don't mind at all.
Well, good evening and welcome to this evening's meeting of the Town Council's General Purposes Committee. And welcome to anybody that's watching on the webcast. I'm just going to ask people to introduce themselves for the benefit of the webcast. I realise we all know each other, but people out there might not do. So if I can, my name's David Whitt, and I'm a town councillor here in Barnoldswick, and I chair this general purposes meeting. I go to my right.
Hi, I'm Tom Whitt. I'm the chairman of Barnoldswick Town Council. That's it.
John Rose Parker, council.
Jane Mills, councillor.
Marjorie Adams, councillor.
Jodie Hoyle, councillor.
Mike Pearce, councillor.
Chris Church, councillor.
Emma West, councillor.
Van Gelder, clerk.
Lovely, thank you very much. Can I ask Jo, have we got any apologies for absence?
Yeah, Lindsay Gaskell, she's on swell.
Thank you. With the committee's permission, I'm going to ask to consider an urgent item, and that's in relation to the consumption of sandbags. And the reason for considering it as an urgent item is that if we're going to replenish the sandbags, we need to make a decision tonight in order for Joe to have the authority to purchase them. Committee agreeable to having that item? I'll do the first three items on the agenda, and then we'll take that one as an urgent one. Item 2 is open forum, and we don't have anybody here to ask any questions. We've not had any online, not that we gave people much notice, but we do welcome online questions for future meetings if people want to raise them. So can we just note no open forum? Item 3 is declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest from people here present? No. Thank you very much. And item 4, the minutes of the last meeting. Is somebody happy to move those as a correct record, please? Mike Pearce there moved and seconded. Thank you very much. All in favour of that, please show. Thank you very much. Those are carried. Right, I'm going to take, I'm going to sign the minutes now, which you have to do in triplicate. But I'm going to take this urgent item on sandbags. So, Councillor Tom Whitt, can I just ask you to report on what's happened with sandbags over the weekend?
Yeah, so there was 5 pallets full and 1 with minimal amount of sandbags left at the beginning of Sunday. Throughout Sunday, I cleared off the junk that was on top of them, and since then all the pallets have gone. So we reckon there's about 30 odd on a pallet. That's 5 pallets full, a lot of sandbags. They've all gone out, hopefully defending people's homes from flooding. And that's about it.
Okay. People may be aware that the forecast for this weekend is Storm Dennis. Is it Storm Dennis?
Yeah.
And we don't really want to be caught with his pants down and no sandbags. Perhaps that's a bit of an unfortunate turn of phrase. We don't want to be caught without any sandbags. So, Joe, can I ask you to report on the enquiries that you've made.
Pendle are going to deliver us 2 pallet loads before the weekend from their supplies, and then I've done inquiries. Now, the people we used last time can't deliver them for 2 weeks because they're so busy. So tomorrow I'll have to carry on going down to get somebody to get some faster.
Okay. The purpose of the urgent item tonight is to give authority to Joe to purchase, replenish supplies, else we don't have any authority to do that. Joe's got authority as clerk up to a certain threshold, but the amount that we'd be buying would be beyond that. John?
Yeah, I'm fine with purchasing more. Is there a recovery element to the ones that are already out? I mean, do we use them again? I saw that Ian would continue to recycle theirs and use theirs again.
Yeah.
I'll watch.
Chairman, the sandbags that are used, if they're used in flood defence and they do get wet, the sand pretty much gets spent. It goes really solid after that. The bags are no longer malleable, so they can't be used to make a sandbag wall, and they're not as usable. I don't know if there's a way to dry them out properly so they don't go solid, but we can look into that. But for the time being, I think it is better to purchase new ones.
I would also assume,
Jodie?
I would also assume that we would need extra for this weekend anyway, because there might be more sandbags needed if the weather's worse.
Yeah, I mean, we're hoping that the 2 pallets that Pendle Council are saying they can provide would get us over this weekend, on the assumption that the 5 pallets that have already been used will stop in situ if people are feeling the need for that defence. But just coming back to John's question about reuse, I mean, at times there are issues with sandbags becoming contaminated with foul sewage. It's not recommended to keep on using those. I don't think that's the case with a lot of the ones that we use, but my advice to people generally is if they feel their property needs sandbags to help defend it, then I say to them, look, if you've got a store where you can put them in and they can be protected from particularly the sun, because the polypropylene degrades in the sun, then that's the best thing. And then if they need them in 3 months, 6 months, 12 months time, they've already got some to hand and they don't need to be getting the community store element. As far as the ones that we've put out directly, so we put quite a considerable number at the end of Gill Lane, we would take them back into store and have them for future use, but that won't be this weekend because they'll stop in place in case of need there. Jane?
Just on that recycling bit, if all these properties have got these sandbags that are not usable anymore, just thinking about the recycling thing, if this is happening in towns all over the borough, is there anything in place that where they can have a central point for recycling? Is that something we can think about? No.
I think they are reusable, but they do degrade. So they tear, in which case the sand just runs out. If you have them for a period of time, the polypropylene is affected by UV light, so that means that they split, and so you can't continue to reuse them. I'm not as extreme as Tom in saying that they're not single use, but the best place for them, if people have needed them on Sunday, they're probably going to need them again at some point in the future. Let them keep them. We're in the business of helping to defend people's property. We're not precious about sandbags necessarily.
But what I was meaning that if they come to the end of their life and people have these sandbags, is there something else we can do with them rather than just put sand
They can put sand wherever they like,
So just
but it's not appropriate. It isn't sand for like horticultural purposes, or you know, it's no good as a turf improver. It's rough sand, so you know, people can use it for whatever they think fit. Chris?
I know, as you say, a lot of people are going to be saving their bags from the last storm because they know the next one's coming. For all those who might not do it, is it just worth putting a little note on social media asking people to hang on to them, so that we're not depleting stocks of fresh ones?
Okay, we can do that.
It's only a thought. I know
Yeah.
most people will
Yeah.
do it automatically.
We don't know where most of those sandbags have gone. People might have come from other parts of Pendle and beyond. Barnoldswick and Davy are the only two townships within Pendle that actually have supplies, and you know, people can just collect them at the drop of a hat. So you know, we suspect that some of them have gone out of town. Fair enough. Right, can we give Joe authority to purchase some supplies? And just to finish on that one, the original 8 pallets that we got were all funded by a community foundation for Lancashire and Merseyside, and it was funding from this community foundation that allowed us to buy the sandbag store and the other equipment and the sandbags themselves. So none of the disbursement of sandbags has actually cost Barnoldswick Town Council anything up to press, and Pendle Council will give us some to replace some of those that have been used. So we should be reasonably satisfied. In 4 years they've done well, and it's not cost the council taxpayers anything. John and then Tom.
Might I just request then, if we're going to replenish, that we don't get ones with metal ties, because they seem to tear each other as you took them off the pallet. The Erie tend to have the plastic ties around them.
I can see Joe relishing the prospect of going back around all the suppliers saying, well, what are your ties?
We could take them off before we put them out.
No, because that's what gets the
ties
sand
keeping
in.
the sand in.
No, and then replace it with a zip tie.
No.
I don't think we want to handle all that tonnages.
When you want to get the sandbags out, you want to get the sandbags out.
It's only that as you were taking them off the pallet, you know, as you pull them towards you, because that's the way you couldn't lift it straight, and then
Yeah.
you tend to snag,
Yeah.
which kind of all the moves.
Tom?
Chair, in the same sort of vein, in light of the disappearance of the equipment as well, one of the sole remaining dirty water pump was used to protect a property and remove the water from the basement this Saturday. Now, if we have flooding on a similar level and that property needs that pump again, then we wouldn't have any other pumps to give out to properties in need on Saturday. And I'd request that we also buy a second dirty water pump to bring us back up to the level which we had before too, just ready for next weekend.
What do people think? John?
Were we not insured for the pumps that got stolen? To replace?
Essentially, no.
Oh, okay.
I'll explain later.
Yeah. Jane?
Well, I think it's an incredible idea. I think if we're one down and we've got, you know, a massive event and somebody's crying out for a water pump and we haven't got them, and we're trying to contact people all over the place to get one for them, then
I can see Joe just relishing the challenge of trying to get this equipment before Saturday.
Might
Um,
like
get
it's
it on
both
Friday.
onto crap.
Touch wood, it will be a damp squib. And you know, we all set up singing and dancing, and you know, there'll be these shower comes over, but there you go. Right, so it's moved and
Have we got the
seconded.
dirty water pump back?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Margie, are you seconding
Yes,
the?
I'll second it.
Yeah. I think we just put a caveat on. We're not expecting Joe to work miracles. If we can get one, great. If we can't get
Trip
one,
over to Pontefract.
we have got one, and it's not a massive pump. It's not like it's going to suck zillions of gallons out. It'll cope steadying away with.
Do we need generators
a bit
as
of
well?
pump. No. We'll just get the pump. Yeah. Are we okay with that then? Thank you very much. Yeah, we all agree? Yeah. Great stuff. Right, we'll go on to our regular agenda then. Item 5 is to discuss events that we've got forthcoming. I think we've debriefed on recent past events at previous meetings, so we don't really want to go over those. We have the St George's Day stroke food festival coming up on the 25th of April, and then beyond that we've got Bands on the Square, which is the weekend at the end of May, and then we've got other events beyond that. So can we just briefly hear a report from Joe, firstly on St George's Day Food Festival, and consider any decisions that we might need to take as a town council.
So, yeah, we've got a working committee for the St George's Day which met not this Friday, the Friday before, and we're meeting again on this Friday, including James Wilson in this one and Duncan who runs the market. We've got quite a number of stalls already booked in, and we've got some ideas for the entertainment that we want on the town square. Launch of Bands on the Square lineup on the same day. Yeah, it's well on its way into it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are there any outstanding issues that you need a decision about?
Don't think so at the minute.
No? Okay.
We've only done sort of outline planning so far.
It's like we just threw some ideas around what we thought it would look like, and what, like, you know, about fairground rides, how many we wanted, and then where things would go, sort of ish, and what sort of stalls we wanted.
Okay.
But that's about the point we're at. So like I said, we've got another one on Friday which is more like including more people, because we only want the initial one just to be like some broad ideas.
Could I ask about St George's Day flags?
Chubby's going to go down tomorrow and check how many we've got.
Good luck to him.
This Friday.
Yeah.
Sometime this week.
So we need to organise putting flags out prior to the event, and obviously our event is 2 days after St George's Day proper, and so we probably want to put those flags up previous weekend, something like that, and then it gives it a bit of a boost. Yeah.
Take them down the following weekend as well.
Or take them down the Sunday following the event, but I mean it depends on volunteers really. So yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Are we content with that? Are we happy to move on to Bands on the Square?
Anyone wants to join the committee though, you're quite welcome. We meet on Friday morning at 11.
Okay. Emma, do you want to update where we're at with Bands on the Square briefly, and any decisions that the town council needs to get involved with?
We met on Saturday morning to discuss how we were going to run the event, what we were going to do. I don't think there are any decisions other than perhaps the purchase of something for the backstage area and a cover for storage of extra beer supplies. Pop-up. Two.
Okay.
So yeah, permission to buy something for the backstage area for bands, because if it rains like it did last time, everybody in the
Got
equipment gets wet.
Okay.
3x3 gazebo boat.
Yeah. Right. in terms of the green room, the area at the backstage, we got a 3x3 pop-up for whatever reason, I can't remember, but it's when we, I'm not sure whether they should do this on webcast, it's when we expanded the number of grotties to 3 rather than 2, and so that we needed a third space.
I don't think any kids are going to watch this.
Okay, all right. We'll assume that no children under 10 are watching this. So that we could accommodate 3 red and white figures, we got the extra pop-up. We can use that pop-up, I think, subject to measurement, at the back of the marquee. And I don't think we need anything extra. We've got a white roof for it, so we're hunky-dory with that one. The area at the rear of the bar, the suggestion is that in order to provide additional cover, that we, rather than hire a marquee, which is sort of like half the cost of purchasing a little pop-up, that we ought to purchase a further pop-up so that we've got enough, because we use 2 at each entrance, and we have one which already goes to the back of the bar area to shelter the coming and going from the fridges, and it's a further one that's needed back there.
Just get another fridge.
No, it'd be sensible to do it the other way, really. Well, it'd be cheaper in year 1. It won't be cheaper in years 2, 3 and 4. So, are we comfortable with agreeing the purchase of that? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much. So, Joel, that's authority to purchase a further pop-up, 6 metres by 3 metres.
That'll be in April.
Yeah. With a cover.
What colour?
White. And we might need some more walls, but I'm not right sure. Might be able to manage without extra walls. Okay, Emma, anything further?
Not that we need a decision on, I don't think.
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Tom, do you want to just update people where we're at in terms of the video recording of the event?
Yeah, so there was a fairly sort of solid consensus not to do any live streaming of the event on the day. But I think there was some support for doing some recording, and that would be a mix of permanent setup cameras and cameras at the front, recording the event, and then the idea is you have several static cameras, you have a switchboard, and you live edit that to switch between the cameras, and then at the end of the set you don't do any post-production, you just upload that live edited video footage to wherever, where it be private for the band or public if they want us to, on the Bot's YouTube channel, just for the world to see.
Okay. And what about there was discussion about a relay, so that you could have screens,
so
bar and
as part of that live editing, there would be capacity to put in relays for the front of house and possibly for the bar as well, to allow the bar staff to watch the event live, because they don't generally have a view of the stage from there, and it just allows them to be more involved in the event. They don't feel out of it.
No.
Although I can't say the same for the punters at the bar.
Okay.
Not that they're drunk. We don't
Right.
serve to drunk people.
Why does front of house need it?
They just prefer a relay so they can see easily
What's happening on
what's
stage.
happening on stage.
So the sound engineer can recognise when.
Sound engineer, sorry, I thought you were
So the sound engineer can recognise when.
When there's a lead singer on,
Lead,
and his microphone.
microphone isn't switched on.
Can you answer that one, Rose?
well,
Past experience says not.
it's an issue that we'd like to have a smoother appreciation of what's happening on stage. Yes. Does that make sense? Yeah. Tom, is there anything we need to do in order to facilitate that operation?
Well, there's the option of hiring the kit, which, you know, you think, oh, hiring's cheaper, but I mean, for proprietary equipment, not necessarily, or purchasing it, and I think we need to look into the prices of that and come back.
Okay. Would you be in a position to report to the next meeting of the full council on the options?
I can be if people agree that's the way forward.
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. Anybody else got any further issues? I mean, particularly where we need to make a decision. We've got a good team of people who, you know, within and beyond the town council who get round with the planning. So, I've thought of something. One of the issues that was raised following last year's event was to attempt to mitigate the sound levels at properties not immediately on the town square, but you know, a little off the town square. And the working group, the BOTS team, did consider whether we should utilise some acoustic screening in particular locations. When there was a general agreement that we should try that and see how well it worked. I'm not sure whether it's a case of hire or purchase, whichever works out best, but again, we need to come back with some facts and figures for the next full town council meeting and then do whatever's necessary. Yeah? Okay.
Does someone let me know a spec what I'm looking for?
Well, yeah. Yeah. We put that. Anything further? Jodie? Mike? Emma? No? Tom? Yeah. One final thing, and I mean, if there is anybody watching the webcast, we go through a heck of a lot of aluminium cans at Barnoldswick Square, and we would desperately like to recycle those aluminium cans. We've got lots of volunteers, but it's a big event and all those volunteers are fully committed to doing all other sorts of work. We have done a certain amount of recycling in the past. I remember one year we recycled about over 20 cubic metres of material, but it nearly killed us because we were having to do too much. And so what the BOTS team suggested is that if there are any organisations out there who would be keen to come and organise and operate the recycling for us, the suggestion to the town council is that if that can be managed, then those organisations should get the income from the recycling of the aluminium cans. And you know, at first sight, it does seem that there'd be some value in doing that. You know, beyond the environmental benefit, you know, an organisation could earn some reasonable money from doing it. I mean, if necessary, and subject to the consent of the town council, that, you know, the town council could supplement that income by a modest payment to encourage the organisation or organisations to take that on. So if there is anybody out there, let Jo know, give her a call 0282
Oh.
788.
I'm asking my mobile out then.
Give her a call on the town council number 01282 788 090 or email town@gmail.com, and we await your many and varied responses. Okay. Can we note bands on the square? We're happy with that. Going beyond bands on the square, we've got an event in June, which is the Valley Gardens. I never know whether it's spring fair or summer fair. Fair. It's a fair. But Joe's going to remind me what date that's on.
13th of June.
13th of June.
Spring.
So we haven't really sorted detailed planning on that, but we'll follow the same pattern as previously. Beyond that, we've got the beating the bounds, which we've got a date for that now. The walk leader has agreed to a date, which I think is something like the 18th of August. Am I wrong?
I think about right, yeah. I didn't have this book out, I'm in my book out.
Okay. Anyway, we've got a date for beating the bounds in August, and we agreed the dates for Barnoldswick Beach, which will run from the 27th of July through to the 14th of August, and the dates for that are determined by a couple of things. Firstly, something we'll discuss later on in the agenda, that's Barnoldswick's participation in the Britain in Bloom national finals, and then secondly, the work on the town square, which is programmed to take place in the back end of August. I think that brings me to the point where, because of the work on the town square, there's a need for us to consider how the market will operate. We can pick this up on a later item on the agenda, item 7, but we just need to be conscious that that's something we need to work through as well. Are we going to any further events beyond that? We've got a second part to this, but is there any discussion beyond? I mean, are we content with getting to the end of August? Yeah?
Yeah.
So the second part of this item is to consider an additional event to commemorate the end of World War World War Two.
Oh, right, okay, that's
Yeah.
fine.
I was reading it wrong. Previously we'd agreed that we wouldn't have a VE Day event, but that we'd look perhaps at commemorating the end of World War Two. And it's a case of, well, first of all, we need to determine when that end is, because there's different dates according to who you listen to, really. So it might be in September, it could be in August, and
The official UK date is the 15th, the 16th, no, it might be 14th actually. No, it's 15th of August, I wrote it down earlier because check.
yes, okay,
I think that's what I came up with.
yeah.
Which is,
It isn't good in the sense that we've got all on to take the beach down.
yeah.
So, we preferred a date in September, which may or may not be acceptable to people. However, I'm getting the cart before the horse, because the town council hasn't decided whether it wants to do something or not. So, folks, what do we want to do?
They don't depend on
Tom?
the date.
I'm happy to do an event celebrating the start of the greatest peace on earth. Sure. I mean, I agree in principle. I think once we hammer down which date it actually is and all the rest, I could be agreeable to going from there.
Okay. Is there any support for that? There's a few nods.
I'm a little bit concerned about what state the town square will be in and things like that, which could mean possibly just a ceremony around the cenotaph. Something.
Right. Tom?
There's always the possibility of it just being down at the park.
Yeah.
We don't necessarily need to do ceremonial parades. Yeah, keep your options open. No.
Any more views? Well, I mean, if we're going to do something, we need to make a definite decision that we're going to do
Depends
it.
on the day.
Depends on
When-
the day and what we want to do.
Can I just ask Joe, when have we programmed the kite festival?
18th and 19th of September or 19th and 20th of September.
Yeah. I don't think we could work it in with that. I mean, I don't think it fits. And I don't think the dates are right. Okay.
Can we all find out what date it is?
Well, we can do it, but I think we'll have the conflicting, you know, the official end and when people said it was ending and all that sort of stuff. I mean, there might be something out there that will tell us. No, I see Tom's searching Tinterweb now.
I mean,
2nd of September is a date here.
on history.com, which sounds definitive, but you
Right.
never know.
But that might be the US interpretation. Shall we sort of hesitantly say yes, we will do something? How big or small that may be, we'll leave to a latter date. Can we explore whether we could get any heritage lottery funding to do something? Because when we did the commemoration of the start of World War One, we did get a grant in order to put that on. So it might be that there is funding available. Tom?
The official end is when Japan accepted the Potsdam Declaration, which is sort of the last treaty that spelled the end of World War II. So that's when Japan signed that declaration, and that was on September the 2nd.
Okay, that seems to be a date to work around. Yeah? Okay. And are we agreed that we ask Heritage Lottery Fund if there is anything available? Yeah? Okay. And we report back at the full council meeting next month. Yeah? Good. Anything further on events? If not, we'll go on to item 6, which is environmental schemes. And the first item here is in respect of Letcliffe Park, to consider future management, and it is including the square bed, and we'll come on to that in a bit. So as members will recall, at the last full council meeting, I think it was, we agreed that we'd approach the Heritage Lottery Fund to see whether we could get a super duper project which would magic up zillions of pounds for an improvement scheme at the park and improve access and all sorts of stuff. Obviously, if that comes about, it's quite a bit into the future. In the meantime, we're hoping to attract a lot more people up to the park. We've got the sculpture trail, which will be promoted as from this next week or so, and there are various elements within the park that we'd like to sort out. We can't do it all at once, but we can chip away at it bit by bit. And I think the first thing we've got is it's a little bit of something, but people are aware of the set paved path that runs up on the boundary. If you come in at the bottom gate, go to the left, there's a set paved path that goes up to the top, which has been very overgrown and it gets very, very slippery, and people take their lives in their hands, particularly going down it. We have got a quote to do some work to layer a hedge, which will prevent the hedge from blocking the path. Joe, can you report on that, please?
Just got one quote in so far, and to lay 60 metres of hawthorn hedge, it'll cost £530.
Okay.
So it says path should be cut back and vegetation of its length and swept clean down to the iron kissing gate.
The quote that we've got is from a good hedge layer that we've seen his work. He's advising that the work needs to take place in the next couple of weeks because the hedges are starting to bud, and once they start growing, it's too late. So if we want it doing this season, we need to commission the work straight away. My suggestion would be that, given we know that the quality is of a standard that's acceptable, that we ought to waive standing orders, not look at getting further prices and get the work ordered with the price that we've got.
Yep.
Chris, did you
Yep.
say? Yes?
Yes.
Yeah. Tom?
I'd second suspending standard orders and going ahead with the work.
Okay. What do other people feel about that? Yeah?
Yeah.
John? Okay.
Sorry, are we just waiting for the cost, or are we not asking anybody else if that which bit?
No,
which bit we've done?
I mean, the suggestion is that, given that we know that this person can do
No, I get
the
that
work,
bit. Sorry,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
just whether we've got a cost in, are we just waiting for somebody else to come with the cost? Or
I didn't know about this the
nobody's
day, so.
approached it. Oh, okay, that's fine. Yeah, okay.
No.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah. Yeah, are we okay with that?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. Another issue is, I mentioned slippery paths, and a suggestion is that the very steep paths, which you just feel going head over heels if you're not careful, that we ought to get some of those cleaned off, jet washed, or similarly treated, so that there's a bit more grip, and given that we are expecting families to be going around the sculpture trail, and that involves going in on these paths, we'd like to get that done sooner or later. I don't think we've got any quotes for that as yet.
I know, because I didn't know which area you wanted to do it.
Yeah, we have had somebody doing some jet washing. They've done the bench areas, but he's not gone up and had a look at job and give us any prices. So I think if we're agreeable to do it, that we give authority to Joe to get that work carried out.
Yeah.
Good quote. Yeah. Okay. And the last bit that I've got, although there might be other ideas, the item on the agenda says about the square bed, and people will know that we've just dealt with the round bed, which is where the totem has been installed, and that's got Scottish cobbles on it now. So you know, there isn't any future maintenance liability of any great note with that one now. The other bed that, I mean, it has been planted up. It's had summer bedding in it. Is what we call the square bed, and this is where, in times gone by, it used to have the War Memorial located there. Obviously, we brought the War Memorial down into the town, and that bed's been sort of a bit indifferent ever since, really. The sheep is now, the ram is now in the centre of that bed. The suggestion is to have it turfed so that the sheep is in a wildflower field, as it were, and that has various benefits because the access into the, well, effectively we want to block off the access into the square so that people aren't trampling all over it and, you know, take the pictures taken. They can have the pictures taken but from the side rather than by going into the grassed area. And we could do it with a woodland wildflower turf, which only needs cutting once a year.
Something similar to what?
Sorry, Joe.
Something similar to what we were on Calvert Road with the...
No, no, it wouldn't be the same as Calvert Road, but it would be appropriate for a shaded area because it's under trees. So it all sounds wonderful. However, it's £39 a square metre. So the bed is 35 square metres, and the cost of purchasing the turf will be £1,230. So
That's with a 15% overall.
okay, so there's a little bit spare. So
But they would overorder it up
Yeah.
and throw it away.
no, you use it somewhere else. So what do we want to do?
Does it
Chris?
does it have to be turf and not seed? It seems expensive.
Well, the thing is, if you're going to have people going in there, your seeding is just going to get trashed because people will trample it. Turf has got half a chance of getting established because you've got a surface that's, you know, much more robust.
Could you turf it and then put the seed on the turf? Shall we say?
Well,
A different type of turf.
yeah, I think you need to get the specialist turf in order to A, suit the conditions, you know, the shading and things like that, and to, you know, sort of achieve a sustainable surface that ain't gonna, you know, need redoing after one season. You end up doing it all again. Chris?
I take your point, but is it going to get a lot of trampling in seedling time, March, April?
Well, if you've been to Aitken Wood, you'll appreciate just what the problem is. I mean, the hope is that we can keep people out of that area because there is a hedge with a very small gap in you know, where you get in now, and that's hopefully going to be blocked off, but it won't stop people clambering over or lifting little Johnny over. Pardon? So as to try and prevent people from going inside. We don't want people going into the meadow, as it were. John?
Why not let it be accessible? Give us a small path for people to do exactly that, and then they won't have to walk around the bits where we want to keep nice. So leave the gap up, and have stepping stones, and then the rest of it can just be soil and seeded.
Okay. Tom, do you want to explain the thinking from the Bloom Group on this?
Oh, I thought there was an idea to put a path in. Sorry, was I not at the meeting where you said block it off?
You may not have been actually, no. Sorry.
Right.
So you
Yeah.
can't get in anywhere near the square?
Drop it in that one, didn't you?
Yeah, the idea is to have a sheep pen, and you don't go into the sheep pen.
So you can't walk around, because you can walk around the edge of it?
Oh yeah, you walk around the edge of it.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, but you
I
wouldn't
thought you were in a
you wouldn't go into the pen. Mine.
Put a fence up.
Yeah, I think the idea is to have a natural area. Yeah, yeah.
I think we
John.
should, I think we should let it be tactile, let it be
Okay.
interactive in the way that people can go and let pictures taken next to it. Don't have it from afar, it closed off with a road
Right.
around it.
Right.
Let it so people can go in, but just make it so that there's a clear way in that people will hopefully use more than other ones.
Right. Can I say that there's been a long discussion of this with the Blue Group. The problem at the moment is that the soil there is full of weed seeds, so we're going to get all sorts of stuff coming up, and actually managing that is difficult. So the thinking is, if you've got people going on and it's soil, you're just going to trample the soil, it'll get compacted, and you won't be able to grow anything because the ground will be compact. The gardeners, and as you know I'm not a gardener, the gardeners have gone through the options of what will work, and the best option with the least maintenance is the turfing. You could have stepping stones, but the experience at Aitken Wood is that if you actually have people going up to the sculptures, the area around it just becomes a sea of mud. Yeah, so it's difficult.
Have we had more than one
Well,
quote?
hang on, I've got Tom. Tom?
I guess first, on doing cheaper turf and seeding it, I think that's a bit of a false economy really, because the reason that turf is so expensive is because there's a lot of work gone into it beforehand to get it to the level that you want it to be. So if you use another turf and then put in the effort to bring that up to the level, you're probably going to put in the same amount of monetary resources over time and probably not get as good a result, because we don't have someone who professionally makes woodland seed turf, available. And the second thing again, Aitken Wood, you have the path, but you just maybe have like sort of 4 metres square around every sculpture. That's just a mud bath because of the sheer amount of people. You have a group of people that want to take a picture with it. They all go on at once. There's not enough room on the path. They step over, they go anywhere. Once you get those paths established, people just use them instead anyway. You can't get around it unless you block it off completely. Or just accept your own mud bath, but I don't think anyone wants that.
Okay. Is there a way forward on this? I can see, there's unease about whether we do it or not. Is there a way forward on this to look at the options, to bring a report back in to the council meeting in March, and then we can decide what to do then? Yeah? Okay.
Where, can I ask where did that quote come from?
This is Pendle Council Parks section, who they've been shopping around to find out, what the options are, and this is the suggested, way forward. I've got John and then Jane.
Well, you've kind of mentioned a bit on there. I was interested in hearing if there were other ideas that weren't necessarily based on gardeners' preferences, but more on the interaction with the statues, which is what they're there for in the first place, really. So, yes, I understand keeping an area where people can enjoy it nice, the floor, the thing that they're standing on, but also to not segregate people from it.
Can I just say that the artist, this is what he wanted. He wanted the sheep in the sheep pen, you know, as if it were grazing. So the artist in the first place expressed the wish for this. You know, we were saying, well, I'm not sure about that, and pulling his chin, and but actually we worked round to come to the same point of view. Jane.
I'm just a little bit confused. So it's going to be a sheep pen, but is there going to be a fence there?
No,
Right.
there is a hedge. There's an existing hedge.
All the way.
All the way around,
Right.
apart from about that much,
Right.
which you squeeze through,
Okay.
and that little bit has been left there so that you can maintain the area.
Oh, okay.
And the
Right.
suggestion, because the turf would only need cutting once a year, is when you need that turf cutting, you actually, you know, put a little platform in, step over it and get into it. But, you know, if you were doing it on a twice weekly, you know, not twice weekly, fortnightly basis, that would be totally impractical.
Right, so people that go in would look over the hedge to see what's
Yeah.
in there. Okay.
Yeah, and there's very, very good visibility. I mean, it's a well-trimmed hedge. I think if you haven't looked at it, you need to go and, in fact, why don't we have a, you know, sort of encourage people to go and have a site visit? Yeah. Yeah. Joe, do you want to?
So I just want to know where the price will come from, that's all.
Yeah. Okay, so we know where we're going with that. Given the reaction to the £1,230 for that last one, I don't think Tom wants to make his further suggestion about the accessibility issue.
Yeah, so
You might not want to put it forward because
I think I do. It's not. It's a different sort of train of thought. I went around with a guy from Wallgate. They're the company that provides the toilets, the toilet hand washing facilities. So in the pavilion, in the public toilets at the co-op, and the toilets up at Letcliffe Park. And we were doing a tour just for him to get the serial numbers, so we can get a maintenance plan, so they get repairs. And out of that, there was one which is a cause for concern in that there's some parts missing that are safety features. It's not too alarming, but it's something we should get replaced soon. But another thing that I saw is at Victory Park there is an accessible wall gate that can be used by wheelchair users. But at Letcliffe Park there's only a sink, a hand dryer that doesn't work, and a soap dispenser that never seems to have any soap in. I know that's cheap to fix, but a sink isn't necessarily accessible. Not as accessible as the wall gate is. Now, with the sculpture trail coming to Letcliffe Park, we're going to expect a lot of visitors, and because of the accessibility in general of Letcliffe Park compared to Aitken Wood, you would see an increased amount of disabled users coming to that sculpture trail because they can actually visit the sculptures there. So my thinking is there's going to be an increase in disabled users who will need to use the facilities at Letcliffe Park. So I'm suggesting that we get an accessible wall gate to install at Letcliffe Park, and then include that with the maintenance contract on the other 8 around town.
Okay, so are you suggesting that we get prices and report back when we've got the report on the rest of the wall gate equipment?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, are we agreeable to that?
Yeah.
We'll put frighteners on when you find it. yeah, I'm no trouble with what's coming with that. They're quite expensive.
It's not an urgent thing. I mean, if it needs to be next year's budget, it can be next year's budget.
You have budgeted for it this year.
No. Okay, John, calm.
No, because he wanted all three doing, that's £7,500.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
ones at Letcliffe, they're coming to the end of life. They've been
Yeah.
installed in '99, so you can imagine they're 21 years old.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cheers,
So
Borough Council.
They've come of age. Well, you know, I mean, things have been put in and they need replacing. It's, you know, fact of life, isn't it? John?
Can I just ask, the one that's got some safety features missing, is that
It is one of the older ones.
right? Is what to what level of safety issue?
There's no isolator installed.
Okay.
So if there was a short in the mains power, and bear in mind these things are made entirely of metal,
Mhm.
that if there was a short on there and somebody touched the button to turn it on, they would get a shock, and it's mains voltage.
Okay.
However, the circuit is protected with an RCD. So if there were a short, the RCD would act as the protection. However, on its own, that piece of equipment, I mean, my suggestion was that we locked the door and we took that toilet out of use, to be honest. I mean, the guy from Walgate didn't say, you know, yes, you should do that. So,
So
yeah. So, I mean, we're going to have to grasp that nettle, irrespective of what we do with accessibility and the like.
I mean, the suggestion is to do all three up there together, because then you save on your installation costs, because you don't have a guy driving for 4 hours on 3 separate occasions. You only have it once, and you have cost savings that way.
Okay, right. So on that note, potential £7,500 expenditure, we will have a report in March when we've got all the facts and figures, and in the meantime that unit is taken out of use, so that there isn't any potential at all for any mishap. Yeah? Okay.
Has it already been done?
No.
We need some signage to say it's unisex for the time being. Well, if you close the men's, then you know you either have men pissing in bushes, or
Can you just
you open up the toilets to the unisex, don't you? Those are
can
options.
you they just have that unit disconnected and
Yeah.
leave them closed?
Well,
Like I said,
But then,
no,
how do you wash your hands?
You can wash them, you just can't dry them. Can you? That's the
No,
issue.
no.
it's all
No, you wouldn't. It,
No, the
So-
unit's an all-in-one.
Is it really? Oh, right.
Yeah. yeah.
You don't go to our public toilets, Joe.
I tend not to.
Okay. Look, they're very well kept, apart from the old Walgate unit.
Or I
which
could just get
is
the
broken.
electrician to go and put an isolator switch.
That's
No,
brilliant.
no. An electrician has gone and done this at some point.
Not one of ours.
Well,
Not one of ours.
it needs sorting properly. Yeah, it does.
I guess the question is, how long will it take us to actually get around to doing that?
Well,
Because if it's closed for months.
the repair would be in the maintenance contract, which we're getting quotes for at the end of this week. So that potentially can be included.
Well, I mean, my idea was to take the unit out of use.
You just split the switch.
So that you know, we just put a sign on saying, sorry, hand wash facilities out of order. I mean, we
Some
could,
jelly.
So is it in the jets?
yes.
Oh, well, that
Don't
doesn't
wash
use
your
my
hands
often
anyway.
anyway, does it?
That's grim.
We can put some jelly.
Yeah. Can have a temporary fix.
Yeah.
Or we just open and disable, we can all wash our hands in that.
Yeah, might have problems because the facilities in the disabled are less robust than in the other toilets.
Very prone to vandalism.
You don't want bugs
They're
in
not.
there as well.
They're not bulletproof.
And
Yeah.
Mm.
Okay, I think we've got a way forward on that,
Okay.
and we can consider whether we fulfil our accessibility requirements in due course. Yeah.
They do have the same facilities as the ones on Court Car Park. For disabled.
Well,
So they must meet
You-
DDA requirements.
you'll be inciting Tom to suggest that we improve those as well.
You'd be right.
Watch out what you say.
You'd be right.
You find somewhere else you can cut $7 grand out of the budget.
Okay. Well, either we're serious about making our facilities accessible,
Yeah.
or we're not, and I think that we need to recognise. I mean, one of the first things when we said that we were having the sculpture trail is somebody who is in a wheelchair asked on Facebook and said, well, will they be accessible? Will I be able to go and visit them?
Yeah.
And well, that's an issue for the greater original lottery funded scheme, but I think we need to make them accessible and make sure that people
Yeah.
aren't excluded because of whatever disability they may have. And there is a cost to that, and we need to accept that it's going to cost. Okay, shall we move on, unless there are any other further Letcliffe Park maintenance issues for the time being? Okay. So 6B, this is the Ribble Rivers Trust, which there was, I think, brief discussion on at the full council meeting. Councillor Tom Whip went to a seminar where the programme was launched, and would he like to report?
Yeah, so I mean it's a very exciting project, really. They've primarily sort of funding themselves from carbon, I can't remember what you call it, credits? Offsetting, yeah. Thank you, John. And also asking for resources from borough councils. I think it was, if they got 15,000 for 2 years, from just 10 district councils, then that project would be fully funded, and it's an ambitious project to cover the entirety of the Ribble catchment for the areas most needed, and they go extensively into multiple factors for where the best place to plant trees are, so along water courses where water is open to sunlight, areas prone to erosion and flooding as well. They went deeply into that, finding the best sites, and Barnoldswick is flagged as one of those sites for tree planting near watercourses. I'm not sure what else I can say for that.
Well, I think the relevance for the town council is the town council's willingness to have tree planting schemes on its land, and we've resolved at previous meetings that we're very keen to do that. We'd like to have more tree planting. So I think the two things come together quite nicely. As Tom says, the Ribble Rivers Trust with the Wooden Connect programme are gearing themselves up to a massive amount of tree planting, and as for the town council, the resource that we can bring is some land. So we've got land in Valley Gardens, we've got land at Victory Park, not quite as well related to the watercourse, but we've got land at Letcliffe Park as well. So we can embrace the initiative that the Ribble Rivers Trust are promoting, and get some work underway in our land holdings. And then beyond that, I don't know whether we can help to promote the initiative with other landowners, local farmers, and get a greater tree planting, you know, particularly along the water courses, Stockbeck, and to get that greater benefit from natural flood management, water quality, wildlife, you know, the fish and other creatures in the water, which benefit from the shade and the reduction in the temperature increases and all that sort of stuff. So there's Valley Gardens, which is a good starting point. Victory Park, we're not going to be able to do anything greatly significant this planting season because it's coming to the end and it's been quite a mild winter and everything's getting going now. But we ought really to be setting the stall out for a big tree planting initiative next tree planting season, and you know, getting on with that as soon as we can. So I mean, it's just a case of making sure everybody's comfortable with what we're planning, getting other people on board, getting residents on board, and involving families, involving schools, involving children, all that sort of stuff. Tom?
Another initiative the Town Council can bring aside from land is there is a national shortage in tree nurseries. The supply is just not keeping up for the amount of trees that need to be planted for government targets, etc. And one of the ways that the Woodland Connect seminar said going forward is to have community sapling production. So community groups raising trees to be used for large scale planting for public good. So like school groups, community groups, etc. I mean, we could possibly have provision for use of council land for that if they're not a tree planting location. So we have allotments, land at the park which is currently not used. We could set up something there.
Yeah.
This is actually raising a tree from zero.
Yeah, so you take your seed, you raise it into a whip, then you pass it on to woodland trusts, river trusts, etc.
Yeah, Marjorie?
Yeah, I think it's a good idea.
Okay. Would the chairman of the allotments committee be rewriting the rules which say that the child playing
the
tree
trees
planting on
won't be
allotments?
planted, they will be raised, they won't be planted in the
It won't
ground.
be permanent
So will be
fixture.
pots. This is put in pots.
Yeah, you raise them in a seed bowl. I don't think you use pots for trees, do you?
I don't think anybody knows.
Okay.
We haven't a clue.
It's not put in the ground. It's a portable tree.
Well,
Essentially, that's fine. Yeah, go
I
for
think we need to find out how we did it. But yeah.
it. Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. Marjorie, did you want to come in?
No, I just think it's a good idea, getting some more trees.
Right.
Put them in my garden if I've any room.
Okay. General enthusiasm. Need to work out the details of exactly what we're doing. Could I suggest that we ask Joe to formally contact the Ribble Rivers Trust to get some dialogue to see what they would suggest and we would find acceptable, and with a view to doing big tree planting next winter? Yeah? Okay. Item C, Valley Gardens, and this is an issue that's been on the agenda previously, where there's a desire, I mean, coming back to the tree planting, to have tree planting on the banking where we took the conifers out, either last year or the year before. There are some standard trees that have been planted, and the intention was to plant a load of baby trees, the whips, on the banking. However, there's a problem that it's quite heavily overgrown with brambles, so there's been quite a lot of thought gone into how do we sort of plant these whips without the brambles just swamping them. And the guy that gave us a quote for the hedge lane up at Letcliffe has suggested a way of working, which is to use a brush cutter to chop all the brambles back, so that they're not all in your face, and then to plant the whips with make your own mulch mats, and the mulch mats would be comprised of cardboard or newspaper covered with hessian, so that suppresses the weed growth around the whips. It's cheap and cheerful. Downside is, first of all, it wouldn't look very attractive. Eventually the paper and the cardboard and the hessian would rot away, but by that time the whips have got going and they won't get finished off by the weeds. And because the whips would be a lot more visible, it could be a target for people pulling them out, things like that. So it's whether the town council is comfortable with that sort of approach rather than the traditional way of doing it, which would be less environmentally acceptable. Yeah, general nods of agreement. Could I suggest that we do some as a trial to see how it works, and if it works, we crack on, and if it don't work, we put the thinking caps back on. Yeah? I mean, if we get his finger out, we should be able to get some in this season and see how they do. Yeah? Okay. And lastly, on this item, environmental schemes, Britain in Bloom finals, to provide an update on current and forthcoming Bloom projects. I've not got an extensive list, but the thinking of the Bloom group is to have a growing together theme, and nationally the RHS are using the phrase growing social, so it's bringing people together through horticulture, cultivating things, and the working title for Barnoldswick in Bloom is growing together, which may or may not, sort of be a better way of expressing that. The different projects they're working on, where the town council have a particular locus, are first of all in Victory Park. At the entrance there's a concrete wall on your left hand side, and the proposal there is to plant pyrocanthus, which
Flowers.
yeah,
They're flowers.
no, they're not flowers, they're the sort of shrubs that are growing around the sandbag containers. So they've got red, orange and yellow berries. They look very good in winter, and the birds eat them.
There's also same next to the container.
Yeah, so the idea is to replicate the planting of the pyrocanthus from next to the containers and grow it up that concrete wall, so that the concrete wall is covered. The town council a couple of years ago agreed to this, but we've new people on and we've forgotten it really. So it will need a fresh approval, I think, to do that, if we're okay. Yeah? All right. Second one in Victory Park, and this to some extent goes back to the item Tom was reporting on about Lancashire Woodland Connect, but that is, and it has been discussed recently, is the diversification of the vegetation in the park. So instead of having a green desert all over the place, we have a diverse ecology that is encouraging wildlife and the like. And we've got to have a site visit with the ecologist, Alison Plackett, who's volunteered to help us with that. But essentially you're looking at the stock beck along the bank, what can be done there, and it might be that the tree planting initiative that we've just been talking about fits the bill. We've got the boggy area where the rugby pitches are, between the rugby pitches and the pavilion, and we've got the banking going up from the rugby pitch up until the top area there. So those are all three areas where the Bloom Group are hoping to work with the Town Council and collectively get that better diversification. So I think Tom was trying to set up a meeting with Alison Plackett to get into the detail of that, but that hasn't happened yet. No. On the town square, people who've been on the Town Council for a bit will recall that the Bloom Group were looking to renew the planting in the 3 back beds. And last year they did the centre bed, which the Town Council bought the plants and the Bloom Group planted them. The Bloom Group have been looking at replanting the 2 side beds, but they come up with an idea which needs a greater consideration, by a wider set of people. And the suggestion is that those 2 side beds at the back should include some sort of, if I say architectural features, that may be a bit grand, but perhaps some sort of panels or sculptures, dare I say, which perhaps might celebrate some aspect of the town's life or history, and tie in with the sculpture park up at Letcliffe, so that people who visit Letcliffe could be encouraged to come down into the town centre, with there's more down in the town centre, come into the town centre, and then people are spending money in the local businesses and helping keeping the town centre alive. So the little working group that's been looking at the 2 back beds have sort of paused any further planting proposals because they want to have that wider consideration of what people might like to see in those beds. And I'm not suggesting people come up with ideas now, but we need to be thinking about it. The issue also needs to be discussed by Pendle Council, because Pendle Council remain the owners of the town square, so they've got an angle on this as well. My suggestion is that if there is agreement to do something and we can find the wherewithal to do it, that we look to having that work carried out when the town square itself is refurbished, because there'll be planning and it'll be easier to get stuff done. And then the planting in forthcoming years, that would be next winter or whatever time of year it's best to do it. So we need to think about those suggestions, and my idea would be to put it on the agenda for the full council, see if there's any further proposals coming forward.
Will we have proposals by then?
Well, I think it'll be a case of we might have proposals as a town council, or suggestions might come in from members of the public, or I'm not quite sure how it'll work, but if we're going to be doing something this next autumn, then we need to get things in place pretty I'm not sure. I mean, there's other balloon projects, but I'm not sure which other ones might have a interaction with the town council. Tom?
There's the sea wall outside. Well, not sea
Vertical garden.
Well, vertical garden. That's coming out again this year. To get an extension to the front. We've been collecting broccoli boxes all year. If you've been to our house, you'd have seen them stacked up outside our back door. It's probably 100 or so. I mean, I'm not sure if we're going to be needing any more funding for that or not.
Well,
last year the new installations were paid for by the town council, weren't they?
yeah. I think the town council has funded the purchase of the plants as part of the
ongoing.
the town centre planting. So, yeah. Shrugs, nods of assent. Come on. The idea with it this year, in that area there's going to be a water harvesting plant with a pump system that would irrigate the vertical garden, and the thinking with the vertical garden is that it will have a waterfall, and so that you know, it's sort of emphasising the water harvesting and all that sort of stuff, and it will have a hard-hitting phrase, as it did last year, about save our seas, no plastic please. So it'll be on the theme of water harvesting. So I can see people's eyes have glazed over. So yes, she knows about it. And the board at the Rainhall Centre are on board. The water harvesting bit is going to be a log store structure with a green roof, and all the water harvesting gubbins will be hidden away. You know, that's going to be quite a civil engineering task, with RSJs reclaimed from Cronest Mill and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, I can see you have glazed over now, so we're going to move rapidly on. If there is anything else that needs the town council on brochure, we will feed back in due course. All right. Item 7, the market. Joe.
Which one's now? Sorry.
Good.
I want a working group setting up.
Okay. Right.
Please.
Right. Tom?
So I think we'll go working group first, but there is another thing after that. Yeah, I'd like to be on it. I think we can definitely have. I mean, if we set it up, we have a couple of councillors and a couple of members, interesting parties like Duncan, for instance, who runs the market. I don't know if stallholders would want to play as traders. Yeah, I think it would be great just to be able to have a discussion around the table.
I think where we're wanting to go with this is to develop the market, attract more stallholders, if that's possible, and you know, to increase the vitality and the vibrancy. So that's the long-term aim. In the short term, mentioned earlier on in the meeting, we've got a problem with the market relocating when we have the work done on the town square. I think we've got a very viable suggestion about how that can work, but you know, we want to carry people, stallholders, along with us, so the working group idea would assist with that. Tom?
Yeah, so I think, was it my suggestion? Or I can't remember. But the suggestion is during the operation of doing the square up, the market would not have a place to sit in the town centre or the town square. So the suggestion is to have a section of Wellhouse Road car park next to the co-op, cornered off, ready for market stalls on Saturday and Thursday, for them to operate there. So it'll still be a central location. They still have the footfall. In fact, it might be increased with people parking there and seeing it, for instance. But to do that, you've got the logistics of moving the market stalls from our current store, which is behind the Sings News agent on the square, over to the car park, and it's quite a distance. So the suggestion was to put in a container similar to the ones that we have for the flood containers near the cenotaph there, and that would be a store accessible for the market stalls and other periphery stuff for that, which is just on site ready to go really. So I think it would be purchase that. You need to put in proper foundations to make sure it's
No.
Just pop it on.
Just
Fair
put
enough.
it
Yeah, alright. Yeah.
And then when the market reverts back to the town square, then the container suggestion is that we relocate that and use it as a store for all the increasing amount of
Pop-ups.
no, not pop-ups.
We could get 20.
Well,
Could just use the start.
there's a desperate need to have decent storage that we can put things in, because we've just got stuff jam full and we've fallen over ourselves now. So long-term use for it rather than hiring one and then taking it back. Mike?
Would that be the permanent site for that container then?
No, you wouldn't want it all there all the time. The possible place for a container would be at the back of the pavilion. There's an area that it'd be quite discreet, and it'd fit there quite well. But I mean, I think at the moment we need to get some prices and just make sure that we can sort of do it.
Need planning.
No, I don't think we need planning. It's only a temporary measure, really. The other aspect is that clearly by doing that there would be less parking on the Wellhouse Road car park 2 days a week, and we need to make sure that the car park up here, Rainhall Road car park, that is maximised, and that we get those redundant disabled parking bays relined and all that sort of stuff. So, I mean, I think...
We should just mention for the benefit.
Go on.
The reason why the disabled bays are redundant is because when the recycling, which was at Wellhouse Road car park, was moved up to the Rainhall Road car park, that took up the previous disabled bays that were there, and so new ones were lined on the opposite side. And since that recycling facility has been taken away, it's now revealed the original disabled, so now we have double the capacity that is needed to be provisioned for.
And they reckon that it only needs 2 disabled bays, so there's quite a few spaces there which are empty all the time because there isn't the demand for use of those. So, I mean, I think firstly Tom proposed that we set up a working group, and we're okay with that. I'm happy to serve on that as well. Anybody else want to? No? Secondly, we need to explore the purchase of a container on the basis that we set out. Initially for a market store, but in the long term as a permanent store. So we need to look at the costs of actually, if we put that down at the market eventually. And then thirdly, we need to ask Pendle to get on with the relining so that we can maximise the number of car parking spaces before we get to the middle of August when there will be that dislocation.
Rainhall will house.
Rainhall. I mean, if they were doing the white lining, we could do with getting the
Garage.
the Station Road car park relined. That they're all worn out, and it might be an idea to get Welsh Road done as well. But I'm just a bit hesitant about that because temporarily, when we've got the market there, the one-way system with the arrows wouldn't be appropriate. So I'm not quite sure we would work around that. We need to work that out. Yeah. Are we okay with that?
Just David and Tom on the working group, yeah?
We can open it up for full council.
I mean,
as well,
I mean, there's anybody else who no, everybody's shaking their head. I can't even get Marjorie on board.
Depends when you're meeting, night times or daytime.
Daytimes.
Probably 6 AM now in Duncan.
Oh, well, can't we have that?
No.
Really don't want
Okay. Well, it's open anyway. Yeah. Okay. Anything further on that? No. Item 8 is bus stops, and I think that's there because the county council are, I don't know, I have to take one step back. The county council from time to time have provided bus shelters. However, they've never looked after them. So in Barlick, we've got shelters that might have been provided by Pendle Council, might have been provided by the county council, but those shelters, the town council has taken responsibility for looking after. On Kelbrook Road, we have shelters that were provided by a company called Prime Site, and they're used for advertising, and supposedly the company looks after them. Looks after them, I'm not right sure that's an appropriate phrase, but the county council has said that it's going to renew the bus shelters on quality bus routes. Quality bus routes is something that was introduced 20, 15 years ago, however long. And it was a commitment by the county council to provide decent shelters for people to wait for buses in. However, the county council is saying that they're only going to renew the shelters up to Cone, and that the shelters beyond Cone, going into Earby, through Calbuck and Salterford and coming into Barlick, they don't want to know about. So the town council needs to be jumping up and down to say we want the county council to take on those bus shelters that are on the quality bus route. And in Barlick, they are specifically the rubbish Prime Site ones that we've got on Calbuck Road. So if we could get the county council to take those on, and we would get rid of it an eyesore, and hopefully we'd get shelters that were being looked after, wouldn't cost the town council anything in the future. So that's, no, they're not managed, they're run by Prime Site.
What's your contract with Pendle?
There's a contract with Pendle to provide them and for the company to look after them, but the level of looking after leaves a lot to be desired. So can we resolve to request that Lancashire County Council takes these under their wing as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Joe, was there anything further on to maintenance of bus stops?
No, that's what you put, I can't remember you putting it down, so.
Okay.
There was also the one next to the triangle.
Yeah, I think that's what it was, I don't think it was this.
Okay. Go on.
Okay, so as I think you'll all remember, there was the end of the culvert work at the Gill Triangle, at the end of Meadow Way, and we put in some lovely, really, really pretty bland concrete
Yeah.
circles for planting, and with that we got the contractors to put in a bench at Pendle Council's expense, overlooking those really pretty bland concrete circles. So it's facing down that way with the bus shelter here. South. So what's the immediate thing that people say after getting a nice lovely bench and some wonderful landscaping done? The
Facing
bloody
the right
bench
way.
is facing the wrong way to wait for my bus. So we've got some complaints about not being able to sit on that bench to wait for the bus. So our solution was to open up the front of the bus shelter there and put in one of our standard benches inside the bus shelter, like the one that we did further down towards Barley,
Yeah.
across from the entrance of Courts Lane, next to
Yeah.
Ben Lane.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's,
Okay.
that's pretty much it.
All right. So I think Tom's ask is, if possible, can we put a bench, a seat inside that bus shelter? Are we okay with that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've got
Yeah.
spare one.
Yeah, I've got 6.
Right. John.
Yeah, I suppose if you could either do that or just turn the bench around to the dark to look at the nice things that you planted.
Now, the thinking behind the orientation of the bench is that people can sit there and catch the sun, so that it's a sunny spot for them to sit in.
Yeah.
If you turn the bench round,
It's right next to a bus stop, isn't it? So people are going to use it for waiting for the bus rather than that.
But you're not going to see it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, but,
That's what I mean, for waiting for the bus
but
stop.
you're going to stare at a load of trees
Yeah.
Yeah,
because
you can't
the
see
area
it.
behind it is all trees. You won't, once we've replanted that area, you won't be able to see the bus coming because you're just going to stare into trees.
And the advantage of having a bench in the shelter is you can sit on the bench when it's raining, which you can't do when it's outside because you get soaked.
Okay. Do we have benches in
Got 6
on
there.
the other?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And in fact, one of the things that we looked at, and the reason why we put the bench into the shelter at the end of Ben Lane was because the little perch had broken off, but it's been very popular, so we've been looking to see whether we could actually replicate that elsewhere. Yeah. Okay, we're comfortable with that. Yeah. Seeing as how Tom's taken our attention down to Skipton Road, we have also had a request for a bus shelter on the opposite side of the road. So in other words, going towards Skipton, where there is a bus stop existing, people have requested a shelter there as well.
Bench.
Well, whether it has a bench or not, I don't know, but
Baby steps.
we need to explore whether that's possible.
The one across from where the bench has been put in at End of Ben Lane on Skipton Road is an absolute dump. You can't see out of it to see whether your bus is coming.
Right.
I use that every day, and it is a nightmare. If it's raining, you have to stand outside so you can see your bus and hail your bus. You can't actually sit in and wait for your bus to come.
No, it's facing the wrong way around.
It's completely the wrong way around.
But
At the bench.
if you had it
And
the way around,
visibility shocking.
Where is it?
in the
On
lay-by.
Skipton Road.
Skipton
Oh, right,
Road.
yeah.
And lay-by.
I
That,
see.
and a lot of residents like to park in that lay-by as well,
Yeah.
which is quite dangerous.
I don't think that's a town
No.
council issue.
No.
But, yeah. Mike, have you got a favourite bush shelter?
Oh,
So, said bus shelter that is required towards Skipton, further down,
Yeah.
that cost to us.
Yeah.
Well,
No.
well, I think what my phrase was, explore the options. I'm aware that there are some spare bush shelters in a county council depot somewhere. So it may be that we could say, oh, do you want to take one of those bush shelters off your own?
If we can get it for free and install it for free, then go ahead.
Yeah. But we would, unless we could get the county council to take it on as a quality bus route
Yeah.
thing, which given the X43,
Goes to
you know, it's a
Skipton,
quality
yeah.
bus.
Yeah.
I don't think that's unreasonable.
It's a priority.
Yeah. So, you know, let's explore the options, see whether we can get anywhere with it. The same might apply if LCC would agree to it, is the one in the lay-by as well.
What's wrong with it?
It's facing in the wrong direction, you can't see out of it, see where your bus is
I think
going.
it's
Yeah.
facing that way because of the prevailing wind and which way the rain had come
I
in.
understand that, but because it's got perspex wind,
Could it not have glass
it's
in
been
it?
that battered, it is.
Could it have glass in it?
One of them has.
Yeah.
Could
One
it
of
have
the
glass
panels
all the way
is
across?
glass.
You can just see out of that, but that's all scratched.
If we get one like the one in Colne, where the bench is on the other way around and
Well,
anyway.
let's see whether we can get the county council to provide something, and they'll do a super duper job, won't they? Yes. Okay.
Sorry, sorry, just
John?
add one thing to that, the other bus stop we were talking about, outside West Craven.
The prime site
The one
ones.
that, yeah, it's an advert thing.
Yes.
You said to get them to either replace it. Can we have that, if we don't get them to replace it, and to the route to be, you know, fresh, could they not take the company to task on the contract for maintenance?
Horrendous, aren't they?
Ensure
Yeah.
do that instead. If they aren't going to replace it, at least make them fix it.
Well, this is a big issue that we've been grappling with for several years now, where the company have got this contract. We're not happy with the standard of maintenance, and you know, it's very unsatisfactory. So you're right, but getting any progress with it, I mean, I'd rather get rid of them and have the county council provide some proper shelters. If we can't get that, we're going to have to carry on battling away with prime side. Okay. I don't think we've got anything further on the agenda, so can I thank you all very much for your attendance. Anybody that has been watching on the webcast, thank them for their interest. I think we've probably been talking to ourselves all night.
Yeah.
However, nevertheless, can I wish you all a safe journey home and declare the meeting closed. Thank you.
Thank you.